Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Are you a professional pillow fighter? Or a 9-to-5 low-cost time travel agent? Or maybe real estate sales on Mars is your profession? It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you do, however complex or intricate, Monday.com can help you organize, orchestrate, and make it more efficient. Monday.com is the one centralized platform for everything work-related. And with Monday.com, work is just easier. Monday.com, for whatever you run. Go to Monday.com to learn more.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hi everyone and welcome. My name's John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic. Today I'm going to be talking to Sam Wasson, a writer of many books on cinema and a contributor to many magazines, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker. So he's done lots of stuff. His books include studies of Paul Mazursky, Blake Edwards, Bob Fosse, loads of stuff. He is also the author of one of my favorite books of recent times, The Big Goodbye, Chinatown and the Last Years of Hollywood. If you like the episode, please remember to subscribe, like, and tell all your friends. We don't have an advertising budget, so you guys have to do it for me, I'm afraid. If you don't like the episode, just please keep quiet about it. Nobody needs to know that sort of stuff. Nobody needs that kind of negativity in their lives. Follow me on Twitter at Drjonty, DRJONTY. But before you do any of that, please enjoy the episode.
It's so cool that you're doing this, shedding a spotlight on this little corner of literature. That's so cool. What made you do this?
Well, I did a couple of interviews basically during the lockdown. I thought, well, there was nothing to pitch, so I pitched. A few friends had written books. I knew Glenn Kenny, who had written the Goodfellas book. And I suggested, why don't we just do a couple of things over Zoom and I'll pitch them to some sites. And I did, and it was okay. But I really enjoyed doing them. And I also found that, there's this sort of no shit Sherlock moment of like talking to the people who wrote the book on a subject. Mm-hmm. Makes for a very interesting conversation because there's a depth of knowledge, there's an approach that they've been thinking about it a lot, and I love reading these books. I mean, in fact, coming from a sort of pre-DVD generation, more than DVDs, more than videos even, I mean pre-video generation, my sort of access to film came through like novelizations and sort of encyclopedias of midnight movies. And so I would always be reading about films I had really no opportunity of seeing often and imagining them. And then they'd be late night TV. There'd be one of these magical movies and it actually exists, and it would try to compare it with what was in my head. So I've always had that sort of connection to the written word that overlap. To me, it just seems like a very obvious thing. But yeah,
that's yeah. So you're really talking about a kind of film going that's lost to history, where you don't have access and need to supplement it with that's quaint now.
Well, exactly. I mean, some things like novelizations, I don't even know if they exist anymore in any sort of meaningful way.
Well, I don't think they do. Quentin Tarantino, as you probably know, just novelized his own work. But that seems, again, quaint. I don't think they do exist.
It's like the kiss of death. If Quentin Tarantino likes something, it's almost certainly over. It's almost certainly something relegated to the distant past.
I think that's a pretty good barometer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine a world even where studios would think that a novelization would sell a movie. That itself seems charmingly out of date.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember reading Return of the Jedi before it was even out in England. The novelization was in the supermarkets. James Caan, I remember the cover and everything, and there was always like 8 or 16 color photographs in the middle, and it was a really important part of the movie-going experience. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Nowadays, because that would be great. Would be to interview someone who writes novelizations as part of this podcast.
Yeah, who are they? I mean, are they even around anymore? Well, Tarantino would know the answer to this, and my editor, who edited that book, would know the answer to this. So if you want to get into that, I can get you in touch with him, and maybe there's got to be a whole world there. Yeah, this is what the internet was made for. Arcane obsessions like this. Yeah.
Going down this rabbit hole. No, absolutely. I'd love that because I think it would be a fun world to explore.
Done.
When I started doing this podcast, and because it was very much encouraged by Twitter, very much sort of putting it out there and saying, would anybody listen to this? And loads of people came back saying, yes, we'd love it. And your name was kind of mentioned as a sort of top of the list guest because a lot of people had read The Big Goodbye, including me. I think I read it in January. Where did you start with this obsession with Chinatown? I mean, it seems like you had this obsession and Robert Town has this obsession, and there's a bunch of obsessions over this.
Yeah, it's an obsession cake. My obsession was never with the movie Chinatown. My obsession is more with the system that created Chinatown. Los Angeles as a place in the public imagination. I'm a native Angelino. I live in Angelino. I'm proud of this city, and I've always been fascinated with the American view of the city, and in large part, how wrong it is. And so naturally, I've always been an admirer of towns as someone who has a long history of writing very seriously about the city in a romantic way that's not sentimental, So, and then there were, of course, these personalities: Town, Polanski, Evans, Nicholson, so it was all of these things laid on top of each other. And then finally, it was Trump winning the election that sent me into a real contemplative spiral of where are we? What is this? And Chinatown became my metaphoric frame of reference for the world we were living in. So the time seemed right. And of course, I'm one who believes that the Hollywood studio system is just continuing its, half-century long decline, and we're at an absolute low point, and we'll probably get lower. So looking back over, asking the question, how did this happen? Can it even return? These are further obsessions of mine, and Chinatown became a vehicle to ask those questions.
I remember when Trump was elected as well, using and certainly seeing other people use the gif of Jack Nicholson at the end of Chinatown being pulled away and, forget it, it's Chinatown. That seems to absolutely sum up a state of political despair This is just where here we are again. We've learned nothing.
You got it. You got it. And it's even worse than we could have imagined. And we're powerless. The sense of futility that is so un-American in terms of what we should be, what we're all about agency. And this was the opposite of that. It really felt like a different country. And it felt like a country that Polanski would understand, and in fact does understand. Yeah, it's hard to imagine Chinatown as made by an American director for that very reason. I often think about, well, what would have that been like? It's hard to imagine that kind of despair. That does seem to be a European kind of despair. Yeah, we don't despair. What's despair look like in America? I don't know. But yeah, the GIF, exactly. That was it. This is what is great about the book is you mix together so many kind of elements in terms of there's biography in there, there's social history, there's sort of psychogeography, and then there's the film as well. But you start with this idea of sort of these parallel men who all seem to be sort of looking for father figures. How did you settle on that as a starting point? I wanted to start with a feeling of memory and trauma. Because that is, to me, what Chinatown is about on the emotional level. That's what makes it about more than what it's about. And that's finally what makes it emotional. I've never been emotionally involved in Chinatown really until the last 10 minutes of the movie. It's always been a puzzle for me. I've never loved the movie for that reason. But when you understand that the movie is about the trauma done to a city, the trauma done to individuals, that's when I kick in. And I wanted to put that idea somehow into the book, that these were filmmakers, artists, working from a place of trauma, like we all do. So that was my kind of structural attempt to introduce that theme.
Yeah, they're all kind of looking for a daddy, and it's the last
daddy. Yeah,
it's the last daddy thing they want. It's what they want, but it's not what they actually need. So, I mean, you did several books. So let's just sort of rewind a little bit, and can you tell me a little bit about how you sort of got into writing books? Because as we were talking about earlier, it feels like an increasingly niche market to some degree, but at the same time there have been these huge successes in recent years of people have been writing best-selling film books. So there's obviously a public out there. How did you get into the game?
It was never my plan. Writing was always my plan, and it was always going to be writing. I was not an avid reader of film books. I was a avid reader and avid film goer, and I knew I was always going to be writing. But it was a professor that I had, a film professor who's the greatest there is, Janine Basinger, who was my professor at Wesleyan in Middletown. And she said, you should write a film book for the Wesleyan University Press. And this was when I was in film school, in graduate school at USC. So she suggested it. It never occurred to me. But of course, it was a perfectly natural thing to do, given my interests. Why it never occurred? It never occurred to me because it was always going to be movies. One loves movies, one goes to make movies. And that was always my path. And then the book thing happened. You go through it, door opens and you walk through it,
I mean, so you wanted to make movies. That was your ambition initially.
Yeah. It was always my ambition. And then the book happened, and I thought, this is totally thrilling and fulfilling. And the movie thing has become just sort of a mistress that I dabble in now. But the books are my wife. And it was Bergman. I'm stealing from Bergman, who said that about theater and film. Although I don't know which one was which now.
Knowing Bergman, neither did he.
Maybe neither did he. Yeah, I forget which one. So that's that.
What was the first book that you were, was that Fosse?
It was about Blake Edwards. Edwards. And I wanted to write on slapstick and comedy and also pick a filmmaker who was alive, who I was thinking, who's the greatest filmmaker of comedy alive in Hollywood that hasn't really been given his due? Obviously there was there were great filmmakers of comedy that had been given, but Blake Edwards hadn't been written about in decades. And there he was in Brentwood, and I got to sit with him, and that was the beginning of the book.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, Blake Edwards, I know him mainly from the Pink Panther books and I guess Breakfast at Tiffany's. My sort of reading about Blake Edwards has come via the Peter Sellers biography, the Life and Death of Peter Sellers, which, my God, that he sounded like such a nightmare. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the medical term these days.
Yeah.
Fruitcake in that case.
Yeah. I was reading some old Blake Edwards interviews the other day, actually, and he's telling a story about how Peter was speaking to his dead mother, and she had ideas of where to put the camera, and Sellers was conveying these ideas to Edwards, and Edwards says, tell your mother to stay out of show business. Or was it tell God to stay? No, it was God. Maybe it was God Peters was taught. And Edwards said, tell God to stay out of show business. So we're really in a new level with Peter Sellers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was absolutely a huge talent and an arsonist at the same time. He just set everything on fire.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, comedy, that sort of comedy as well, I think is one of the most difficult things that Hollywood can do. I think it sort of seems to lose the knack every now and again and then rediscover it.
Well, I wanted to look at how you make low comedy high, and why this is considered low, and the what we consider a sophisticated comedy is considered high. How do you sophisticate slapstick? And Edwards did. I put him up there, with Chaplin in that respect. I would even put him beyond Preston Sturges at his best. Yeah, and that's really what the book is about. It's looking at how to tell stories with slapstick that are emotional and meaningful and not not frivolous, like Chaplin.
I mean, I always like slapstick. As I love Buster Keaton, I love Chaplin, I love I can even like the Three Stooges, which I think is sort of increasingly difficult these days. But one thing I really hated since I was a child, and it's almost like a phobia for me. I can't stand custard pie fights. There's some.
It's so funny. Blake has the greatest custard pie fight ever in movies.
Well, it's on the cover of your book, I think.
It's on the cover of my book. Yeah. Which is called A Splurch and the Kisser. And splurch is the sound that Max Sennett used to describe the pie in the face. So no, your custard thing, that is a phobia. What's that about? That's really interesting.
I think my mum would always say, so in England, there's the BBC, which is a sort of like the most sort of respectable sort of a broadcaster, and then there's ITV, which was the commercial one. And for children's TV on the BBC, they would have like the multicolored swap shop, and it would be this very it would be fun and children's stuff, but it was sort of kind of quite ordered. It was like watching something that maybe your school had produced. And on ITV, there was this anarchic show called Tiswas, which was just custard pies and buckets of slop, and they would keep Tiswas, yeah, it was called.
Okay.
And they would put adults in a cage and the kids would throw stuff at them. And I just remember being absolutely terrified of it. And my mum saying, don't watch ITV. It's really common. And we watch BBC in this house. We don't watch So Tiswas always, and she had this thing about it was a waste of food. She would, I mean, we knew it was like shaving cream and all this sort of stuff. So it's not really food, but just to her, it just represented a huge waste of food.
Well, Blake is a combination of BBC and ITV. At his best is what it sounds like. That cage element is disturbing. That's the part I don't like.
Well, I mean, there's a real violence to it. There's a real sense of like there's a bunch of characters called the Phantom Flanners who basically are dressed like Black Riders. They wear big black capes and stuff, and they just jump into any scene and just hit everybody with custard pies. All the presenters, whoever, the cameramen are all wearing raincoats. But watch it on YouTube. You will seriously think they did this shit for children.
I'll probably love it.
It's crazy.
Maybe it's a child's fantasy to have the parent, to have that kind of control over the parent. maybe it's freeing for the child on some level to see. Sounds like putting a hat on a hat, though. I'm gonna check it out. I don't have the phobia, so I'm gonna go look.
Well, no, I mean, you were drawn to it in Blake Edwards' work enough to put it on the cover of the book and to sort of put that in the foreground.
Well, it's extravagant and it's expensive. And, you know, one of the things we don't get so much in Hollywood comedy is money on the screen, you know? And I like to see money on the screen. I mean, I like to see what Hollywood does best, which is spend money for, you know, art. And so the biggest pie fight in the world is a Hollywood idea. You know, so I like to see that in the hands of a great slapstick filmmaker. This was a great race, is a big studio movie with big stars, big locations. It's over 2 hours, and that's money on the screen, you know? So I like that.
Oh man, I'm so tempted to use a joke about the money shot, but I will not.
It's all money shot.
Exactly. I mean, again, maybe that's at the heart of my phobia. Maybe it goes even deeper. How did you feel sort of writing about comedy? Because that's also a really difficult thing, I think, approaching from a point of view. You know, there's something well, it's difficult to write about comedy. You know, I've written about satire in the past, and you know, the temptation to do it as dryly as possible is overwhelming. You know. Yeah,
you have to have an idea that you think is a good idea. You have to have an idea that you think matters. You know, so much of writing about comedy doesn't matter because the question is it funny? Is it not funny? We can answer for ourselves as we're watching the movie. I don't need anyone to explain, you know, Mel Brooks to me. I laugh, you know? So it's rare that you see a comedy that whose artfulness is not immediately evident to you. But with Blake Edwards, there was this, what I thought was a secret world of artfulness that was not about the laugh so much, that was about ideas. And I thought, well, maybe viewers of Blake Edwards, this can enhance the experience. It can, in addition to the laugh, which doesn't need to be explained, the artistry might, the cinematic artistry, because you can't explain how a person is funny. You know, I mean, if you try to explain, if you could do that, then we could all be Peter Sellers, and we're not. So there's absolutely no point in trying to explain why something is, you know, why someone is funny. It's stupid. So a lot of comedy writing goes there, and it's just theory. You know, it's theory, and sometimes you think it's interesting, and sometimes it's not interesting. But I think it's ultimately, you know, like you say, I'd rather watch a funny movie.
I love the idea that Blake Edwards as well had this thing of sort of like, I'm going to overlight all the scenes that Sellers is in because I don't know where he's going to go. And I just want, and that strikes me as a precursor to sort of the Judd Apatow sort of school of, you know, we'll just do loads of improvisation, loads of takes on set, and then sort of whittle it down to the best. You know,
well, the difference is that, you know, they had a script,
right?
And by and large, if there were improvisations from Sellers, they were more riffs. You know, like a jazz musician. You know, it wasn't free improvisation the way that you see a lot of in that Judd Apatow school, which also has no visual character and you know, limited artistry, I think. And if there was if he was dealing with a comedy genius like Peter Sellers, I would cut him a little more slack. You know, if you've got Miles Davis in your band, in your ensemble, you say, take it away, Miles. But it's not quite that. So I'm glad to draw that distinction in my mind.
I'm not going to name any names, but yeah, they're not really at that level.
No.
And so you went from doing Blake Edwards, and you did a book on improvisational comedy and a history of improvisational comedy, and you did Fosse as well, a book on Bob Fosse. How do you go through that line? Are you getting those? Are you bringing up those? Are you taking those to the publishers and saying, okay, this is going to be my new book? Is there a progression from one to the other, or do you want to have a change and you want to shift to something totally different?
I want to change. I want to change. I don't want to do the same thing and then have it be better than what I did before or worse than what I did before. Then I'll have this thing of comparing in my mind and I'll feel like a failure in some way. So I try to keep moving around to different types of things, at least in my mind they are. And also you look at the shelf and you go, what book should be here that's not here? What book is missing from this shelf? And if you can find a book that's missing, a lot of books are missing that should be missing. And a lot of books are missing that you don't write those. You write the book that shouldn't be missing. And those are hard to find because generally if they shouldn't be missing, they're not. So for whatever reason, the culture has overlooked this corner and I go, oh, let's go there. And then my publisher says, all right, let's do it. Or my publisher says, no, let's not, we don't need, the world doesn't need that. So, but there's no plan. There's no plan. It's all things I love and things that that need to be said, that I believe need to be said. There is an emotional urgency for me in all of these books that is urgent. They all have that quality, except for the Breakfast at Tiffany's book I wrote, which was not urgent so much as it was curiosity, a curiosity I had about why this movie that I didn't really like or understand had been so successful. And in the course of answering that question came to actually get some appreciation for the movie.
That seems funny because both with Chinatown and with Breakfast at Tiffany's, both these things both movies that you've dedicated individual books to. I mean, I know there's a lot more going on there. Is it almost that you're sort of picking stuff not because you love the movies, but because I get the same thing that there are movies that I really think don't work and I'm not sure. I kind of like them. I have a relationship with them, but it's not a love. I don't know. I'll give you an example so it's clearer. Yeah. 1492, the Ridley Scott movie,
I never saw it.
It's in many ways a sort of failed movie. It doesn't quite work. The pacing's off. It should be a much longer movie. It's still a very long movie, but it still feels squeezed. But that movie, when it came out in 92, I think. Yeah, it will be 92 because of 1492, because it was to link to the year. And when it came out, I went to see that like 3 times at the cinema, and I wasn't like writing. I wasn't working. I had no professional need to go and see the film, but it just bothered me for some reason. And
do you think it was about what was going on inside you, or what was on the screen, or probably some combination of both?
Yeah, it's definitely an interface of both. It was definitely something to do with Gerard Depardieu's sort of performance and how, and it was just, I couldn't quite work out, is this the best film I've ever seen or the worst film I've ever seen? It didn't seem, it was like a Schrodinger's cat of movie, that it couldn't be.
A Schrodinger's, what is that? What is?
Have I mispronounced it? Schrodinger.
I have no idea if you. I don't even know what you're talking about. What? It sounds fascinating concept.
Oh, the quantum mechanics thing. That if you,
I don't know a fucking thing about that.
Oh, this is fascinating. So basically, if you send an electron through like the 2 slits, and you fire an electron, it can go through one or the other. And if you fire a bunch, there will be an interference as if they're interfering with each other. So it can go through one or the other. But the argument is that until you observe them, the electron kind of goes through both. Okay. And this makes absolute sense from a mathematical point of view, and from the way the electron seems to be behaving, it makes absolute sense. But from a sort of real world point of view, it's like, well, it has to go through one or the other, surely. So Schrodinger said, if I put a box behind one of the slits, and if it goes through this slit, it presses a button and it releases gas and it kills the cat. And if it goes through the other slit, it doesn't hit the button, it doesn't kill the cat. Then the cat has to be either alive or dead. So in this sense, Schrodinger's cat should, in this thought experiment, it should decide the position of this electron. But what they concluded was that until you open the box, the cat will be both alive and dead. And then when you open the box, everything, reality crashes and chooses a version.
Now I know how your brain works. Alive and dead, I cannot hold this concept in my head, alive and dead. But I guess zombie is alive and dead. I don't know. Wow.
Well, it's almost like you have two alternative universes, one in which the cat is alive and one in which the cat is dead. And when you open the box, you go into that universe.
Jesus. All right. Wow. Okay. So I've got to see 1492 is what this means.
You'll be looking for the cat. You'll spend the whole film going, where's this cat John's talking about? I'm giving you such a list of things to Google. Tiswas, Schrodinger's cat. And I can't even remember if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
I have no idea.
Somebody will send me an email and say it's not that, it's something else. Okay, let's get so you're in Chinatown. You're in Los Angeles, and Trump has won the election, and you think, fuck. Mm-hmm. and this leads you to Chinatown. Is that accurate?
Well, that was the catalyst. I had been thinking about this version of this book for a while, and then when that happened, I was like, all right, now this needs to happen. And it gave me another sense of urgency to write the book. I had always had the urgency insofar as the book is about the end of a great age. So that was something I wanted to scream about. But then Trump gave me another thing to scream about.
Because that idea of the end of a great age is often seen in other books as well as sort of like as a moment of triumph, because here comes the new Hollywood, here comes the Peter Biskind, Easy Rider, Raging Bull Hollywood. But that's not necessarily a view that you share of that historic moment.
No, I mean, I see, since the 50s, I see Hollywood as diminishing, with the studios. There's no question in my mind that Hollywood was healthier in the studio era for any number of reasons. And which isn't to say that, the post-studio era, what we call the new Hollywood, was not a great era. It was. I would say it was the second greatest era, and then we keep declining. And part of what made this new Hollywood great in its own way was what it had in common with the studio era. And so the closer that we get to the studio way of doing things, I've learned, the better Hollywood is. Now we are, as of yesterday, you could read that Paramount is now talking about moving all of its content onto streamers, and basically said we're going to get into the shit business now. And this is as far away from the studio idea as we've ever been.
It's sort of really decoupling the studios from any sense of cinema or theater experience, isn't it? It's just like we're just going, I'm thinking of Boogie Nights and him going onto videotape. We're just going to do something which is totally non-theatrical.
Exactly. I mean, when you take the art out of the hands of the filmmakers, and a great misconception about the studio era was that they did that. In fact, it's not true at all. And slowly but surely, the art has, like Boogie Nights, gone to idiots and incompetents. And I love the porn analogy too, because it's like, there were days when you had to go to a movie theater and be accountable, look around. I have to watch this porn in public. Now, you don't have to be accountable, and it's the same with Hollywood. No one's going to see what shit I download tonight. I, of course, don't download shit, but I could if I wanted to, and there would be no shame in it. That's cool about Boogie Nights. I love Paul Thomas Anderson too. I mean, I'm always happy to be in his hands, you know? So there are always moments of people find ways to break through the cracks. It just gets harder and harder with each generation. But God bless him.
I find that I go to a lot of film festivals, and I just find that it's so beautiful having an experience of cinema that's not coming out of Hollywood. That, you know, you sort of see French films or Italian films or Spanish or Japanese or Korean, and it's just like, oh, that's a new way of looking at something, or it's not. Yeah, they all maybe have their own set of cliches that I'm not as familiar with, but it just feels like a really good head wash that, you know, you've got out of the same sort of genuflecting superheroes.
Yes, exactly. And I grieve the era when that was not. I grieve the system for which when that was not as true as it is now.
All these new films that did come out, like Chinatown, and like, you know, later Coppola would and Friedkin would come, and all the others. There was also a sort of like nostalgia there, that they were all in their subject matter choosing sort of old-fashioned or period pictures, like Chinatown. You're looking back not that many years in the past compared to when it was made. It seems very far in the past nowadays to us, but it's not that far in terms of when Polanski's actually making the movie. But also in the sense that with Coppola, he's trying to make Zoetrope, studios. He's not saying I don't like the studio system. He's saying I kind of want my own studio.
Yes. No, Coppola loves the studio system, and that's why he, goes and has gone with Zoetrope his whole life and got closer than anyone has since the fall of the studio system, when he founded Zoetrope out here in LA. Or founded Zoetrope Studios out here in LA. And that's been a lifelong obsession of mine, because I really see Coppola as a hero in that sense. In many senses, I see Coppola as a hero. And, there's always a little worry that you have when you start to research someone deeply. Am I going to fall out of love with them? And in the case of Coppola, it's the opposite has been true. And I've only fallen more in love with him. And his vision is even greater than I even knew it was. And his mind is greater than I knew it was. And yeah, it's that's why I'm writing about Zoetrope, for that exact reason. And I think, now that the question of distribution, now that we have these alternatives to distribution and streaming, it's a real opportunity to reinvent the industry. And I think Coppola has the right idea with live cinema. And that's another thing that I'm wanting to write about. Now, whether it's too late for American audiences, I don't know. I don't know how hungry America is anymore for this quality product. I have to believe they are. I have to believe, although I don't know, when Scorsese came out and said these superhero movies are fast food, I was amazed at the vitriol, the pushback that he got. So maybe we don't want a filet mignon. On the other hand, maybe the internet is just a slum hole full of rage, and you walk out and you get hit. So it's hard to tell what the temperature is out there. I've gone way off track, but I always hope, that there will be a Coppola who would do something like this. Maybe it's not too late, but people have to be frustrated first. We need a Bernie Sanders in Hollywood to say, it doesn't have to be this way. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's like a postmodern sort of collapsing of high and low art, which I think is fair enough. I have no problem with that. I've no problem with, I like the odd comic book movie. I can sit and watch them. It's like I ate at McDonald's for lunch today in Italy, which is practically sacrilege.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely sacrilege.
You should cut that out of the interview.
I'll just say a steak tartare or something. But I don't want to Morgan Spurlock it. I don't want to just eat that all the time. And that seems to be what the diet has been recently. And something like Chinatown, I wonder if that film would necessarily get greenlit today.
No, it would not. That movie would not get lit 30 years ago, greenlit 30 years ago. You know,
Right.
I don't know if that movie would get greenlit even 10 years after it got made.
I mean, do you, because of the ending, because of the despair, or just because of the whole movie in its totality?
Certainly the despair. The despair, you know, but also for all the reasons I'm complaining, you know, that movie would not be greenlit. It's not a blockbuster. You can't imagine the ancillary markets. You know, you can't bring teenagers to it. It's complicated. It's hard to sell.
When it comes to weight loss, no two people are the same. That's why Noom builds personalized plans based on your unique psychology and biology. Take Brittany. After years of unsustainable diets, Noom helped her lose 20 pounds and keep it off.
I was definitely in a yo-yo cycle for years of just losing weight, gaining weight, and it was exhausting.
And Stephanie. She's a former D1 athlete who knew she couldn't outtrain her diet, and she lost 38 pounds.
My relationship to food before Noom was never consistent.
And Evan, he can't stand salads, but he still lost 50 pounds with Noom.
I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. Even through the pickiness, Noom taught me that building better habits builds a healthier lifestyle. I'm not doing this to get to a number. I'm doing this to feel better.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom users compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
You know, it's art. You know, art is hard to sell. Art is hard to sell. If it's art and it's easy to sell, it's generally because it's already done its job by being accepted into the consciousness. But when it's new, you know, like you were talking about 1492, if it tastes a little weird, that could be because it's new. Now, it could also be bad. But this is part of what Hollywood executives' job should be, is parsing out that taste. But they don't do that. You know, they don't do that anymore.
One of the characters, when I was reading your book, and it is, you get this real feeling of, you know, these different personalities, and they're all, you know, butting heads to try to make what they consider their own vision. I think I'd always used to hold up Robert Towne as, you know, I mean, I occasionally write screenplays, and so I always think of sort of William Goldman and Robert Towne as these sort of people to aspire to, really, as the, and boy, was I wrong. Boy, did I feel my idea of this single writer, this single, you know, to sort of put against the writing rooms and the multiple collaborators and all the rest of it. And then I'm reading this and going, no, he had loads of collaborators, and he you know, you could easily have had 3 different names on that screenplay.
Yeah. I don't want to diminish Towne's contribution, which is major. But I do just want to rein in the cult of Towne, which is enormous, and say, well, look, there were these other people, and also, why is this the great American? You know, this is always this idea that this is the great American screenplay. You know, it's a great screenplay, but a lot of why it's been crowned the great American screenplay has to do with Sid Field, I think, and when Chinatown was written. But yes, it's complicated, is I guess what I'm saying. And if we can hold both, if the cat can be alive and dead, you know, we'll be better off.
I mean, he's got like a friend who's I forget his name, Edward Taylor, I think, who he's essentially sort of in the room with him while he's writing the thing and bouncing ideas and reading stuff out. And
literally in the room, in the room.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. And he just, partly because Edward Taylor doesn't seem to be particularly interested in fame or fortune, but he's just completely written out of any of us. I've never come across this guy when I've been reading about Chinatown. Nobody's ever said, and of course, Taylor's fingerprints are all over this film.
No. And I wouldn't say his fingerprints are all over the film, but he was definitely a collaborative influence and shaper of the script. And
then when Polanski turns up, of course, he looks at this screenplay and it's kind of like, this is a monster. I can't, it needs to be completely redone.
Yeah, Town, it does not. It's also ironic that this form, which is all about structure, when we're talking about Robert Towne, we're talking about a guy who really needs help with structure. So that when it comes to dialogue and atmosphere, I think he really excels. But you want to talk about a master of structure, you're talking about Polanski. And you can see that in almost all of his movies. And you can see that in the script. And you can see that in the filmmaking. There is no slack. Towne has slack. In a way, it's one of the artistic cornerstones of his work. I love Pauline Kael called him a flaky classicist. And I think she got it right, as she often did. She often didn't, but on this one, she got it did. And flaky classicist, that's kind of some slack in there. Roman, no. So yes, and this was not information that this was known that Roman, maybe not the degree to which, but yes, there is no Chinatown without Roman Polanski on the page or on the screen.
I think, I remember knowing already that the sort of the dark ending, the unhappy ending was more Polanski than it was Towne.
All Polanski.
They'd argued about it. And I thought your observation at the very end, because it's a film I've watched and not necessarily analyzed. But that moment at the end where he sort of goes away from that classical framing of things and it almost becomes handheld camera and cinema verite. I'd never know, which I think is a sign of true style. I'd never noticed that before, but that utterly is the reason that it amps up the emotion at the end, because all of a sudden it's almost like Brechtian. It's almost like they've broken the fourth wall, and
it feels like the floor has dropped out.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great filmmaking, and just that little moment, it has an emotional effect on you. Thank God for Polanski that he knew what he was doing.
And the other major sort of artist who's at work here, of course, is Jack Nicholson as a sort of star producer, the guy who's bringing it to Robert Evans and who is sort of in the corner to have this film made. I was curious who you talked to in the writing of the book in terms of researching the book.
I talked to Evans extensively.
Right.
I talked all in the back of the book, but in terms of those principles, I spoke to Evans and Polanski. Towne did not answer my attempts to. I didn't respond, and Nicholson is not doing interviews anymore.
Right.
He's not leaving the house so much, and from what I heard, it is not because he's unwell.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to be having a good time. He's just, I think he's just in recluse mode,
He's just retired.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I didn't get to speak to Jack, unfortunately, someone I really admire.
I think he brings in this amazing sensibility to Jake Gittes. That's a prize-winning observation from me, but there seems to be this sort of 60s sensibility to him, even as he's playing this period character. So for me, one of the most powerful scenes in Chinatown is when he's talking to John Huston, and there's this real sense of new Hollywood talking to old Hollywood, and he's criticizing him about wealth in a way that sort of prefigures the sort of hippie movement of, how many pairs of shoes can you wear? How many meals can you possibly eat in a day? How many houses can you live in? And when you were talking about the inspiration for the film as well, for the book as well, in terms of Trump, Trump becomes this very sort of John Huston figure in the incest and everything as well.
Oh, yes. A guy who keeps amazing you with the level of evil, keeps just when you think you've seen the worst, it gets worse. And that's hell. I mean, that's hell. And Huston is amazing in that movie. I mean, he's so good. He's too good. I mean, and by that, I mean, he's so good that I cannot, that now whenever I see Huston, I see Noah Cross.
Right.
He is too good. And yes, he's the Trump figure. Absolutely.
Which makes you realize that Trump isn't so much this novelty that we all took him for. He's always been in American culture. He's always been the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel,
Yes, he's always been yes. And human beings can, we can get evil, we can get evil. And the depth of the evil is so striking in Chinatown. That's one of the things that I do love about it. Like the character of Harry Lime in the Third Man, although he's so cute, he's so charming that you can forget. And the movie is so fun that you can forget how evil it is. With Chinatown, you don't forget. That evil is amazing.
I was reading the Hitchcock Truffaut book because it was recommended. One of the things in the podcast is people keep recommending books, and now I start reading them, and it's a great education, but by God, it's costing me money.
I'm sorry, my thing keeps dinging. I'm going to turn it off if I can do that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Okay, it's on Do Not Disturb. All right, tell me, Truffaut.
So the Hitchcock idea of the MacGuffin, I always find that was in a way a damaging idea, because people have gone, it doesn't matter, it's a MacGuffin. Whereas like in The Third Man, the fact that he's on a black market for penicillin, that informs the whole movie. That's such a memorable and a sort of like, it's such a very specific idea of evil. It's like, he's not just bad because he's going to destroy the world, because what does that even mean?
Right.
But he's watering down penicillin, and you should visit the children's ward where the children go who got the shit.
Yes.
And you're suddenly, that's something I never knew about, but by God, that's horrific,
It's a great weapon, isn't it? It's a great weapon. I think also of one of my favorite weapons in No Country for Old Men. I'll never forget whatever that thing was that he used. That'll never leave my mind. I mean, that level of evil. But yeah, The Third Man, that's a great weapon, isn't it? I mean, from a dramatic point of view.
And I mean, thinking of Noah Cross and that moment of absolute hypocrisy right at the very end, where he's turning his sort of daughter/granddaughter's face away from the horror, like, oh, don't look, I'm protecting you. And it's just like, oh man, it's almost unthinkable, unimaginable, that level of corruption.
And the fingers are, if tarantular is a word, I don't know if it is. I think I used it in the book, but those fingers, God.
Yeah, it's like Nosferatu or something.
Yes, Nosferatu, exactly right. Yes, yeah. And
also, I mean, rewatching the film and reading about it, you get this idea of. I remember being very uncomfortable once rewatching it and thinking of the role of Faye Dunaway and the women in it, and being very uncomfortable with that scene where he's slapping her. But rewatching it, I'm sort of thinking this is so much about women from the very beginning, with the husband who's distressed that his wife is cheating on him, and then you meet her later and she's got a big black eye. There's just violence towards women is absolutely ingrained in this society throughout the film.
I don't see it that way, but I guess there's violence towards men as well. I mean, I would like the movie to be more about men and women. And I know that was one of the things that Town and Polanski thought about, how much to make the woman Chinatown from the point of view of the man. That would have brought me into it more emotionally. But that metaphor doesn't always come across. It does in the end of the movie, in the sister-daughter. And that's what I'm really brought into. But their love story is not pronounced. I always had a problem with that. But yeah, he certainly beats her up. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, even that is sort of like a 1940s sort of, airplane parody, the slapping of the hysterical woman or the slapping of someone to get some information out of them often. And it's kind of to show how macho you are, that you're indifferent enough to sex, that you will slap the beautiful woman just to, to get whatever it is in your mission that you're going for. It feels a bit like a quote of that as well.
He slaps her because he slaps her because he's lost his mind. He's lost his mind. She loses her mind too, in the end. Everyone does. So I don't see that as about gender. I see it as about sanity. That's to me closer to what the movie's about. But this is why people talk about this.
We can take it back to Schrodinger's cat. We can use that as our, it can be this and this at the same time.
But now to your point, I mean, Curly does beat up his wife. I'm putting that together now. So maybe it is more pronounced than I was willing to see. Yeah.
You mentioned consequence earlier on when we were talking about, porn videos and going into a sort of XXX theater. But it's a similar thing that at the beginning, Jake Geddes lives without consequence. He's just cashing the checks, getting some new blind set up. And then by the time he has to he loses his mobility, which I think you make a good point about, you need a car in Los Angeles. And so when he loses his car, he's screwed. And he goes to Curly's house. It's when he has to face up with the consequences. He's sort of like, those photographs, it's no longer a joke about a Chinaman, having sex with his wife. It's about here's the guy, here's the woman who's been beaten because of what I did.
Do we have that reaction shot? I don't remember. Do we have that reaction shot on Jack? He registers.
I think it's more embarrassment than anything else. I don't think he sort of go. He sort of go. It's a similar sort of embarrassment that he has when he's telling the dirty joke and Faye Dunaway standing right behind him. It's that same sort of like, oops, I kind of know I'm doing something wrong, but I can skate. Except when a woman sort of turns up and looks at me in the eye, and then I crumble.
Yeah, I always thought the character of Geddes was really about venality and image. How do I look great in my suit? I've got the picture of FDR on the wall. I'm a fashion plate. And he thinks the world is one thing. He's cool, and then realizes the world is something else. Maybe violence towards women fits somewhere along that spectrum. Maybe that's part of his consciousness. I've never thought of that. It doesn't come to my mind, but these filmmakers are so good. I give them the benefit of the doubt. So if it's there, it's probably there for a reason.
Right. Yeah. And again, this is like one of those things that I always laugh at when I'm writing a review, because it's such a sort of cliche that you say, in many ways, another main character of the film is the city itself.
Yeah, the city itself, yeah. Right, yeah. But I hate that.
But here, it's indisputable that this is a Los Angeles movie through and through and through. And it's about a certain sort of origin story of Los Angeles, of where it's coming from, and the water rights and the land rights and the tales of exploitation. Were you already sort of keyed in, and you just said you're an Angelino at the very beginning, so were you already really engaging in the history of Los Angeles even before you approached Chinatown?
Yes, definitely. It's always been the character of where the character of the city comes from, where is also an obsession of mine.
Right.
And it gave me a little opportunity. This book gave me some opportunity to write about that. I don't see Los Angeles so much in Chinatown, ironically. To me, it doesn't look like Los Angeles. It really looks like a parched, bloodless, it's really a Polanski nightmare of Los Angeles. So I don't see the city as I see it through my eyes, which I see much more clearly in something like Shampoo, for instance,
right?
Or The Long Goodbye. Those bring out the character of the city more. But this is indisputably a Los Angeles movie insofar as its backstory is, basically true,
Because I have seen, what did I see that was sort of disputing the China, or very much gave an alternative view of what was happening to Chinatown? It was in the documentary Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Oh, yeah.
I think sort of says, Chinatown says this, but actually it was more that. I can't remember the details now, but
yes, there is that in that movie. Yeah, no, it's that information is available to anyone. Movies are not documentaries. So they used the drama to their own gain, as storytellers do.
Sure, yeah. I can't remember. I can't even remember the details, but it's something about the dam and the guy who's meant to be the hero. But yeah, I can't remember enough details for it to be relevant, really. You said you said as well about your attitude to Chinatown as a film. How did that change in the writing of the book? Because were you? I mean, I'm presuming you were sort of like reading lots of scripts, and you were talking to these principals, and you were watching the movie a number of times. How did it develop your view of the film?
What I came away with was increased admiration for Faye Dunaway's performance in this movie.
Right.
And I don't think, there's so much to admire. That's one that I'm more connected with her than I am with him, because she's so vulnerable and trying not to be vulnerable. It's so complicated. I don't know how she kept track of that character from moment to moment, not just holding it all in her head, but then the technique of executing it. I love that performance. That's a knockout to me, and the cleverness of the conception around that character and her goodness, her damage, her victimhood, her beauty. It's a fabulous character, more exciting to me than Jake Gittes, and a great performance. So that I think that's the thing that I ended up loving, that I didn't go into it loving.
That's also the performance that changes the most if you watch it twice. I mean, obviously everybody's seems to have watched Chinatown. I mean, I can't, but I definitely watched it for the first time at some point. And when you watch it the second time, you have to look at her totally differently, because at the beginning she's a femme fatale and she's like, oh, I know, she's untrustworthy and she's all these things.
Right.
And then you watch it the second time and it's like, no, she's
a mother.
Exactly.
Yeah. She's a mother and a victim. That's exactly it. That it's two performances, and they're on top of each other, and they change from moment to moment. And you said it. Fabulous. Fabulous.
And even when she goes to the old people's home with him, and it's like they sort of that's almost like one of the lightest moments of the movie, because they sort of become compadres. She actually they play it for comedy. And it's kind of
a relief.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely.
Relief. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense for her as well, because at last she's actually becoming an agent in her own story as well. And she can play act for some reason other than simply camouflage. God, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest compliment you can ever pay a film book is that it just sends you back to the movie. And the minute I finished reading this, I was like, okay, Chinatown, a film I've seen probably in the double digits. I've got to see another time. And watched it, you know, the night after I finished reading your book. And opened my eyes to so many elements to it. So if I'm making any observations which sound smart, they have been inspired and filtered through the reading of your book.
Well, a good movie, maybe by definition, is one that you can go back to. You know, a good anything is one that you can go back to. If something has been made with the talent and care of Chinatown, and then successfully, you know, a lot of movies are made with talent and care and are not successful. This is made with talent and care, is successful. It's going to be filled with conscious and unconscious decisions that are the right decisions. And with a million of those, why wouldn't we go back and find stuff in it? I'm so grateful that those are there. And Chinatown is not the only one.
No.
You know, it's one of many. It's one of many.
And yet they didn't think it was going to be a success. So there was a whole idea of like them changing the score at the last minute. And, you know, there was a lot of uncertainty about screenings and things.
Well, no, it's only very rare that you could. I mean, maybe some would say it's impossible. I don't think it's. I think when there's a Star Wars, although wasn't the last Star Wars a bomb? I don't know. I stopped paying attention. But it's hard to know or impossible to know when anything is going to be a success. You know, that's true of art. When it's genuinely new, you can't know how it's going to be received, if it's going to be received at all. And that element of guesswork is gone, virtually gone from Hollywood. You know, now everything's a gamble, but they're very safe gambles. And there are so many ancillary markets and venues and way to make your money back over time and all this stuff that it's almost not a gamble at all. But with those guys, it was.
And someone like Evans, who himself has written a magnificent book, The Kid Stays in the Picture, is one of those books that I watched the documentary just so I could hear his voice, and then reread the book so I could read it in his voice, but the voice is in the book, you know?
The voice is great.
He's such a kind of tragic figure in some ways. I mean, and it's ridiculous to feel sorry for him because he's had a wonderful career. He's created some great stuff, but, you know...
No, but you're putting your finger on something, I think, which is that for everything Evans had, and he had a lot, and for how grand he lived, the irony is what he really wanted most of all, I believe, was to be known as a filmmaker and not as the playboy, which is an image he cultivated, by the way. So he's getting what came to him. But really, what he wanted was to be the man who brought movies to the world. He wanted to be known as that. And the image, unfortunately, has cast too much of a shadow over what he's given the world. And his fuck-ups with Coppola are known, and were fuck-ups. But you step back, let the movies speak for themselves, and you see that this was a man who basically said yes to what he believed in and bet on talent. Didn't bet on box office, you know? Didn't bet on political trends, you know? Bet on, I think this could be something good. And the proof of that is, to his own embarrassment, admits he didn't understand Chinatown. But he understood that the principles involved knew what they were doing. And I love him for that and remember him for that. And I know that without that quality, you and I would not be having this conversation, because that book would not have been written, because the movie wouldn't exist.
Yeah, and so many great movies. I mean, wow. Yep. I mean, just what great taste and what great discretion to know that if you don't get it, people whose taste you trust do. So you'll go for it. You know, you'll say, okay.
That's what you're paying them for.
Yeah.
That's what you're paying. I mean, when you go to a restaurant, you don't go into the kitchen and look over, you know, the chef's shoulder and say, I think we're going to need a little more cilantro on that. No, you let the chef, that's what you're paying
cilantro,
for.
spoken like a true Angelino.
Yeah, that's true. I picked right, cilantro. It's incredible to think that someone would go back there and tell, Anthony Bourdain how to... Evans understood that, and the great executives do.
Yeah.
The great executives do understand that. And also it's very practical because that's the only way you're going to get the great talent.
Yeah.
Because when word gets around that you're meddling, that you're going into the kitchen, who's going to want to work with you? Mm. Unfortunately, those values are out of date.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get Weinstein and we get other people like that as an ancillary to that problem. So you mentioned you were is your next project Coppola? Is that your...
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk about that at all?
Yes. Well, it's an extension of what I've been talking about. It's the story of Zoetrope, which is Coppola's production company, the greatest production company of all time, and the biggest dream ever dreamt in post-studio Hollywood. Since the founding of Hollywood, it's the greatest dream ever dreamt. And he's still dreaming it. And he's still working on Megalopolis. And the story of this man is like it's a Moby Dick story. And it's not the Godfather story, which has been told, But the Godfather is not at the heart of Francis, I don't believe. And so I believe Zoetrope is. So I don't think the story of Francis has been really told because this is it. It's not Corleone. Corleone is a detour, a happy detour. It's Zoetrope. So that's the book that I'm doing now.
Brilliant. I can't wait to read it. And there are so many other Coppola movies. I mean, I loved Rumblefish when I was a kid.
Me too.
Such a good movie.
Yeah,
so great. And he made that back to back with The Outsiders.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think there's such a legacy there that maybe isn't appreciated enough of how much independent cinema owes to that kind of vision and that kind of adventurism as well.
Adventurism, absolutely right. I mean, Coppola, the producer, is I guess what I'm saying, but that's so close to Coppola, the director, showing the producer's mind working alongside the director's mind. I mean, I spend a lot of time in Apocalypse on the book, and there you really get to see the extraordinarily original ability he has, not just as an artist, but as a producer. And the conflict between those two things and how they support each other. I mean, that makes him unique. I mean, Spielberg, Scorsese, giants. They're not the producer filmmaker that Coppola is.
Yeah, he's a sort of impresario, the whole mix, the whole enchilada.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Sam, could I ask you for a recommended book that if our listeners and myself, for that matter, will love to get recommendations from writers and to go off and read these books. And it can be anything you like. A recommended film book.
I like to recommend the work of Janine Basinger, who's my friend and my professor, not only because it's the best, but it's the closest to, it's the truth. I mean, a lot of people write about studio Hollywood with intense bias and oftentimes ignorance. These books are the truth. The one that about the way the system really worked, the one that I think is a woman's view is a fantastic book about the woman's picture in Hollywood. It's an incredible book and it's so warmly written. So I think everyone should read that. Even if you're not interested in the woman's picture, the way it approaches genre is fascinating. And the star machine, about how Hollywood created stars. And Hollywood really did create stars. The star was really like an art object in the studio system. We don't have that anymore.
Clint Eastwood was like one of the last people to really go through that system, wasn't he?
Yes.
Learns to ride, learns to dance.
all that stuff. And his new movie opens tomorrow, actually, on streamer, and maybe in the theater too. So the Star Machine, you really get up close with how stars were produced. I mean, in the sense of manufactured and in the sense of the creation of producers. So the record of that has never been told more completely and more accurately, with more love and affection and insight than Janine did it in that book. If you love musicals, her book Musicals, fabulous.
Who doesn't love musicals?
If you don't love musicals, you don't
love movies.
You don't love movies. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not kidding at all. That's absolutely my Singing in the Rain is one of my.
Oh my God! Yeah, of course.
Are you kidding me? It's all those old black and white Busby Berkeleys, the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. I mean, it's just like, tired of that. You're tired of life.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Amen.
Okay, on that note, Sam, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And hopefully when you've got the Coppola book ready to go, we can talk again.
All right. I would love that. You're a pleasure. And thank you for doing this.
Okay, that was my conversation with Sam Wasson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. He was great to talk to. I look forward to talking to him in the future when he's finished his Francis Ford Coppola book. His recommended book, well, it was really a recommended writer, was Janine Basinger, who has written books on The Silent Stars, The Star Machine, the movie musical, as well as many more, actually. I'm looking at her page, and she's got a bunch of books that look really interesting. So I shall certainly be dipping in, and maybe, who knows, maybe she'll agree to come on the podcast and talk about them as well. Thanks go to Elliot Atkins for the music and Ali Howard for the artwork. Until the next episode, please take care.
As the days get shorter and the nights chillier, it's tough to keep up your fall workout routine. Thankfully, there's Alo Moves, the app that brings workouts and wellness to the comfort of your home. Join alomoves.com with code ACAST for a 30-day free trial and 20% off an annual membership. From yoga and Pilates to sound baths and meditations, Alo Moves has it all, with classes made to fit every schedule. Find your perfect wellness routine anytime and anywhere with code ACAST at alomoves.com.
1-800-Flowers.com knows that a gift is never just a gift. A gift is an expression of everything you feel and helps build more meaningful relationships. 1-800-Flowers takes the pressure off by helping you navigate life's important moments by making it simple to find the perfect gift. From flowers and cookies to cake and chocolate, 1-800-Flowers helps guide you in finding the right gift to say how you feel. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Cue the fireplace and your favorite fall movie. There's nothing better than a cozy evening at home with a glass of First Leaf wine. First Leaf is a personalized wine club that delivers right to your door. Sounds magical, right? They get to know your favorite tasting notes, which varietals you enjoy, and whether you prefer sweet or dry wines. So in every shipment, you get bottles tailored to your unique palate. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/fall to get your first 6 wines for just $44.95 with free shipping.